all your stuff. What can figure it out? That's how it chooses you.
Hello, Teresa.
Hi, Claire. What's going on today?
Oh, I was going to ask you. Well,
Neener.
I'll tell you what's going on. It's goddamn tumbleweed season.
It was very windy yesterday, that's true.
It's a thing. Okay, look. In modern media, when a tumbleweed is depicted, it's sort of alone.
Right.
It's harmless.
Yeah.
It's a signifier of the wastelands.
Yeah.
And it's harmless, and it goes on its way, and it's solo. Okay. I just want you all to know that is not how it works, okay? They come in droves.
They do. It's like tribbles. It's if you see one tumbleweed, there are 1,000 more just over the crest of the hill coming at you and your car and your house and your garden.
We're under attack.
Under attack from floaty, dead balls of vegetable matter. It's the worst kind of attack to be under, because what do you do?
Exactly. My partner, Tim, said yesterday that he saw one that was as big as him. And then we called it a timbleweed. I said, was it shaped like you? And he said, yeah, the face was really freaky.
Amazing.
If you just live in a field, nothing happens. But if you have a house in a field and other structures, they collect.
Yes, it's a drift of them.
And it's super annoying when you have a garden because they collect in the garden and they cover your plants. You know, it's just annoying. For the last couple of weeks, we've just been every few days having to clear them out. And this morning I woke up and I knew there was going to be just masses of them out there around our garden. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a fun way to do this. And my idea was to get reacher grabbers and for Tim and I to race using the reacher grabbers to grab them. We just grab them and move them to where we know the wind is prevailing and we'll get them out of the way.
Send them on to the next property to the east.
That was my idea. But Tim had a better idea, which he's actually put in action starting this morning, which is to train our English Shepherd, Sage, to carry them away.
Nice!
Which is already working.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure. She gets to do a job, which she loves. She gets to be outside doing it. Oh my gosh. And there's problem solving involved, right? They're hooked on things. She has to be careful. She has to get them out from fence stuff. Like, yes, I can see that Sage would absolutely adore that job.
You know, she's a smart dog, so she's already been watching. She already knows what we're doing. We haven't yet gotten to the point where she'll just walk up and grab one, but you can hand it to her and tell her to go and she'll carry it away.
Nice.
Which is great. Because she knows where they go. She knows the spot. So I like Tim's idea much better. It's already cooler than mine.
It involves all the members of the household.
Exactly. So anyway, that's what's going on the prairie.
Tumbleweed season, Chez Claire. It was super windy yesterday in that beautiful fall way that always reminds me of that Ray Bradbury story, Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Oh, so good. I've been thinking about that movie too. That's a good Halloween-y movie.
It is. Jonathan Pryce is so creepy in that.
It's creepy as fuck.
It's terrifying. Yeah, no, it's a great Halloween movie. It's the best kind of Halloween movie because it's like, what the fuck is happening here? The question we love to ask ourselves.
Especially in horror, scary stories.
Yes, we are scared by things we don't understand. I mean, I'm also scared by dudes with knives, but I understand them, so it's it's an easier kind of fear, I guess.
Right.
The solution is clear in that case. Run. Or fight back.
But when it's a dark wizard giving everybody their ultimate dreams with a cost you cannot possibly pay.
In a carnival on the edge of town.
That shit's scary.
So yes, the wind is nice. It's my favorite part of this season. And, I wanted to tell you, I've been talking to friend of the podcast, Jeffrey, and his beautiful wife, Jessica, who are dear friends of ours. And I have told them that I want to visit them at Halloween. And I told them that in the summer, and they know me very well. And so they're like, yeah, we'll see if that actually happens. Totally fair. It's the right attitude to take when I say I'm going to visit you. But I figured it out, and I think my midterms fall in such a way that I am actually going to be able to be in Paonia over the weekend of Halloween. So I'm very excited about that.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Better hope that carnival doesn't run into town.
Well, I mean, if any town in Colorado is going to have that carnival, it'll be Paonia. They'll be set up in a field, and we'll have to negotiate with the devil to get out of there.
Well, it's going to be a great Halloween then.
I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
You're going to come back with stories.
Uh-huh. Oh my gosh, listen to what happened.
Well, that's so cool. You have a trip to look forward to.
I'm excited to be more than two places. I'm at school and I'm at this house.
That's going to be awesome.
And I said, is there any like Halloween situation I need to be aware of so I can like plan around a thing or come for a thing or whatever? And he literally showed me a snapshot of the Paonia, Colorado message board on Facebook where they're just now deciding what day they're going to have Halloween.
Right.
Which I fucking love. It's like, oh, I think we should have it on a Sunday because there's no school on Monday and Halloween is actually on the Sunday. And so I think it would be better if we had it on the day. And I'm like, this is a community of people who are going to dress their kids up as demons on a Sunday night because it's Halloween and that's what you do on Halloween. Like, it's just amazing. I love that.
It's definitely a go with the flow community. That's awesome. Do they also decide what day Christmas is going to be
Maybe.
on?
No, that has a date associated, I think. They know what day Halloween is. They're not negotiating Halloween. They're negotiating trick or treat. In honor of Halloween, I organized that trip for myself, and I'm going to tell you today about the Salem Witch Trials. But first, we should say that this is the podcast It Chooses You.
It is the podcast It Chooses You. That woman over there is Teresa Sparks.
And that woman over there is Claire Patton.
We tell each other stories. We tell you stories. We have fun. We learn some shit. That's how this works.
Yep.
We hope you enjoy it. Please download, like, and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast. If you really, really enjoy the podcast, we have a Patreon just for you. It's patreon.com/itchoosesyou. Thanks. So you're going on this trip. You're in a Halloweeny mood.
I'm in a Halloweeny mood. I bought a giant pumpkin 2 weeks ago. Now the pumpkin is what I'm looking at on the table across from my desk. Very excited.
Oh, yeah.
Gonna carve that as soon as I have an idea of what she wants to be. We're still in communication about it.
Well, Teresa, I'm very excited because as we're in a Halloweeny, creepy, spooky mood, you're going to tell me about quote-unquote witches.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about witches a little bit. Going to talk about some specific events. Going to talk about some Puritans. Got lots of context for you.
I mean, the Puritans are the creepiest of religions.
They really are.
I mean, there's something about Puritans where it's so shut down that the devil's just right there.
Yeah.
I think that they fucking love the devil because they think about the devil a lot. I think they want to join his club and they just won't admit it to themselves. They want to wear red underpants and writhe around and drink blood out of a gourd.
You heard it here first, you guys. Puritans want to drink blood out of a gourd. That's historical analysis from the podcast It Chooses You.
Are there still Puritan? I know there's like a flavor of Puritanism in certain sects of Christianity. I said Christianity, sex.
You did.
Sects of Christianity. Would anyone out there identify as a Puritan? Are we going to alienate our Puritan audience is my real question.
I don't think that's a concern. So I think we're okay to slag them off as much as we want.
Okay, great. Thank you for the permission.
Anytime. So the Salem Witch Trials happened in the 1690s. They happened in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. How did these people arrive at this place? Like, what was going on? So we're going to just do a little brief review of early American history and the Massachusetts Bay Colony. John Winthrop, who was the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony for 12 of its first 20 years. He was born in 1587. He died in 1649. These are 17th century people. John Winthrop was an English Puritan lawyer. He was one of the leading figures in founding the Massachusetts Bay Colony, as you might expect from someone who became governor of it for so long. Massachusetts Bay Colony was the second major settlement in New England, following the Plymouth Colony. They landed on Plymouth Rock, and then the actual real colony, and they had a lot of trouble because it's very rocky and windy and cold out there. And then 30 years later, they're like, hey, you know what we should do? We should try and find a better place. And here they are. Winthrop was born into a landowning family. They had some money. He was a respected member of county society. But he was like friends with members of parliament. He wasn't a member of parliament himself. So sort of like, you know, of high enough status, but not of the highest status. In 1629, he would have been about 40 years old, when anti-Puritan King Charles I began a crackdown on nonconformist religious thought. He thought, it might be time to be moving on. Catholics and Protestants had been burning each other alive for like a decade by then. We were about 10 years into the 30 Years' War. That was mostly happening on the continent, but of course England was affected. And England also had its own ongoing, lengthy Protestant/Catholic/independent other religion showdown situation ever since Henry VIII founded the Anglican Church because he wanted a divorce and the Pope said nah. And he said, fuck you, now I got a new church, and now I'm also going to divorce my wife and marry this new lady I really like.
Yeah.
Religious conflict had bodily consequences at the time in a way that in sort of modern Western Europe and America, they don't anymore. It was dangerous to not be a member of the religion in charge, and the religion in charge changed every half generation or generation. And also, you weren't allowed to not be religious. Like, you had to be religious, and you had to pick the winning side at all times. So, if you're a person of actual faith, it's a very complicated time to be alive.
I just imagine them in their homes with a little spinny wheel with, like, Catholic.
This year.
Puritan.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, we're Protestants now. Okay. We're Anglicans now. Or we're Methodists.
Winthrop was essentially headhunted for this job. He wasn't like the guy who said, you know what we should do? We should colonize this place. He wasn't that guy. He was the guy who got tapped on the shoulder by the person with the money. And he's like, you know what you would be really good at? Governing a colony in the wilderness. So, come on, we need you, let's go. And so he said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Also, I'm pretty worried my stuff's going to get burned down and I'm going to die. So, in April of 1630, he and his fleet of 10 ships and like 700 people, I think, set sail from Southampton, landed in New England, and founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Woohoo!
So they all made it? But all the ships?
Oh, yeah, I think that all the ships made it. Some people died on the way, I think. It was a dangerous crossing.
Yeah.
Transatlantic journeys in the 17th century were not cruises. Massachusetts Bay Colony was focused in what's now present-day Salem and Boston. And when we think of the founding of Boston, this is what we're talking about. The thing about Puritans that we kind of don't have in our popular historical conception of them is that they were intensely literary people.
They liked them books.
And that one book in particular, they really liked the Bible. Very important to them. They wrote about their relationship with God and about what it means to be a person and what it means to be a religious person in society and what that society should be doing and what God might think about that society and what they're doing, and on and on and on and on and on. And Sarah Vowell puts it, she says, they basically wrote books and then stuck their noses in them for 5 or 6 generations until God invented the Red Sox. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what we're talking about. Just incredibly literate, very angular thinkers, let's say. Very intense. There's a statue of a Puritan in Boston, and he has this look on his face like he's terrified he's going to hell, but also he's sure he's going to send you to hell.
Well, you know what he's doing? He's trying to get rid of that boner.
If he concentrates hard enough, his boner will recede.
Yeah.
That could be. Winthrop's writings and his vision of this colony as like a Puritan city on a hill is the phrase that Reagan and other conservatives have picked up and used.
I had no idea that was from the ye old Puritan times.
Ye olde Puritan times. I think Reagan said shining city on a hill, but the actual quote is city on a hill. There's a flag that they made that basically had a Native American on it with a speech bubble that said, come over and help us. So they're very much like, we're going to go over and we're going to Christianize whoever we find and we're going to save their souls that way. And aren't we fucking amazing for that?
Well, that is so nice of them.
Isn't it, though?
The hubris.
The point is there's a ton of writing about what they were thinking. And so we can actually know them pretty well because there's a significant historical record of their interior thoughts about everything that was happening. He also wrote about how to influence the governments and religions of neighboring colonies, because as soon as they landed, other people started coming. But what's important there is that neighboring colonies, you heard it, had different religions. That'll be important later. For this next section, I'm going to rely heavily, if not entirely, on Sarah Vowell's wonderful book, The Wordy Shipmates.
Excellent.
I cannot recommend this book strongly enough. I may do a smidgen on it in the future. It did what I thought no book could do, which is make Puritan history interesting to me.
She's a warlock, that one.
She is. She's very smart and funny by everything she's ever written right now, starting with this one. And she makes me love them because she loves them. Even looking at terrible things they did. It's history based in love, which is important. So when she would tell people at, New York cocktail parties that she was writing a book about the Puritans, they'd say, why? Right?
Valid question.
Probably the question I would have asked. And she said she'd come up with an answer that she thought sounded good, that might engage them or whatever. But she said, really, it was because the Puritan idea that citizens in a state are members of the same body and are beholden to each other and duty-bound to help each other gave her a lot of comfort. She was in New York on 9/11 and after, And that was a very sad, difficult time to be in New York. And she says that before 9/11, she once waited in line for 10 minutes to cross the street because a presidential motorcade was blocking traffic. And she heard a woman next to her say, "Who the hell does he think he is?" And she said, "I'm pretty sure he thinks he's the leader of the free world." But she said a few days after 9/11, she saw a huge, slow-moving line of people waiting patiently. And she didn't realize what they were waiting in line for until she saw that they were waiting to give blood. And it moved her. It moved her so much at that time and in that place that Americans had decided they were once again members of the same body and beholden to each other and duty-bound to help each other. In the Wordy Shipmates, she says, quote, "Readers who squirm at microscopic theological differences might be unsuited to read a book about 17th century Christians." These are people who strictly believe one thing and back up their beliefs with the Geneva Bible, which was translated by a team under the direction of John Calvin. Problem is, their neighbors also strictly believe one thing, and they back it up using that Bible, but sometimes the things they believe are different. And so here we go. This rigidity of thinking causes problems. This is how we start fights with our neighbors. Speaking of this microscopic theological differences idea, I remembered as I was putting this together that Emo Phillips, who is one of my all-time favorite comedians, has a great joke about microscopic theological differences in a bit called Golden Gate Bridge that is a rhythmic joke, and it's amazing. It's on YouTube. It's worth it. Look it up. Sarah Vowell goes on to say that Winthrop and his fellow Calvinists believed in the doctrine of predestination. Since God decides everything, God decides whether a person will end up in heaven or in hell before that person is even born. The people who are going to heaven are called the elect. It's God's own aristocracy. And if that sounds like some frolicsome fox hunt, she says, understand that to be a Calvinist is to be the Duke of Discomfort or the Duchess of Fear. Because here's the thing. How does anyone know? How does anyone know if he's saved? He can't.
Yeah.
What he can do is work, try, believe, repent, love God, and hate himself. The diligent, hardworking, and pious are, quote, visible saints. And if a person seems saved, odds are he is saved. Thus, he will spend every waking hour trying to seem saved, and not just to others, but to himself. Because if he says or does, or even thinks heretical things, isn't that just proof he was never saved in the first place?
I love this idea that God is a sassy friend who won't tell you what's going on.
Right. Knows exactly what's going on and refuses to tell you.
Hey, God, am I saved? Wouldn't you like to know?
Just let you squirm. It's like what we do in the squirming is somehow the definite, like, that's the point for them. How do you behave in the squirming?
Yeah. There's something admirable in embracing the discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, yikes. The problem for me is that the idea of predestination is a really easy way to excuse bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And also, obviously, it's elitist. And then it's also this striving, and this is true of a lot of Christians. It's the striving for something later. When it's like, well, what if this is paradise?
Mm-hmm. Heretic.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're a Puritan, you have to. Too bad, so sad.
I would be a horrible Puritan, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, as I read this, I'm like, whoa, what a way to live. It's very intense.
I like the emphasis on diligence and hard work, though. That appeals to me.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm shopping now for religions. I'm like, what if I could take the appeal of diligence and hard work from this religion, but add in, like, the flexibility of Buddhism?
Sarah Vowell goes on to say, quote, let's hazard a guess that some people are not going to be up for this.
Raising my hand.
As we've just done, we are some of the few who are not up for this. The constant uncertainty. Is it streets of gold for me? Or am I merely lighter fluid for the flames of hell? It weighs on the believer. Even John Calvin himself, the French theologian who popularized this school of thought, wrote the following in his last will and testament. And this is the craziest part of this entire... Okay, listen to this. John Calvin says, the will I have had, and the zeal, if it can be called that, have been so cold and sluggish that I feel deficient in everything and everywhere. Truly, even the grace of forgiveness God has given me only renders me all the more guilty, so that my only recourse can be this, that being the Father of mercy, he will show himself the Father of so miserable a sinner. If John Calvin doubts he's a good enough Calvinist, which is, of course, the most Calvinist thought he could have, Sarah Vowell says, imagine the jangling nerves of John Q. Puritan.
Oh my God.
Yes, so this is an incredibly rigid and stressful way to live. They take God very seriously. They have no idea what he wants. They're doing their best at all times, and they might be damned anyway. I mean, I'm sweating just thinking about it. So now I'm actually leaving Sarah Vowell. Thank you very much, Sarah, for your wonderful context and hilarity in trying to understand these people. Moving away from her now. Don't forget, life was really, really hard in this colony. The winters in Boston are fucking terrible. And these people were heating their houses with wood fires. It was hard to grow crops. They had to make sure they had enough, saving crops for the winter was absolutely necessary. This is a time of, refrigeration doesn't exist, except outside, which is a giant refrigerator for 5 months of the year. And they're helping themselves to land that people were already using. And some of those people, strangely, had some feelings about that, and took some action based on it. These were incredibly literate and educated people who were living in shacks in the wilderness with mostly Bibles to read. Dark days. I mean, they were happy about the Bible part, but still, dark days.
Yeah.
Also, these were grouchy people. See also, am I saved or not? And I can't tell, okay? Salem Village, which is present-day Danvers, was known specifically for its fractious population. People there had a lot of internal disputes. There were disputes between that village and Salem Town, which is present-day Salem, which is right next door. That's how much they were fighting each other. Salem Village and Salem Town were right next door to each other because they couldn't agree to be a Salem together. They're like, no, that side of town is wrong about some stuff, and we're right about it.
My feet have been cold for 9 years. Fuck those people.
That's right. I have had nothing but winter wheat for so long. Arguments about property lines, grazing rights, church privileges, whatever those are. I'm imagining it's like who gets to worship when. I imagine they all wanted to be in church all the time, except when they were working. Imagine congregations fighting, and it's simultaneously terrible and hilarious, which is my favorite combination of things. The neighbors of Salem Town considered the folks in Salem Village, literally right next door, to be quarrelsome. And in 1672, the villagers had voted to hire a minister of their own apart from Salem Town. So Salem Village is like, we're so separate, we're even going to have our own preacher now. The first two ministers they hired, James Bailey and George Burroughs, stayed only a few years each. Because they're like, these people are fucking crazy. And also, they left because the congregation refused to pay them their full rate. Like, we had a contract for a certain number of dollars a year, and they're just not paying me. Also, they're really mean, you guys.
Yeah, so they were cheapos on top of everything else.
They were cheapos who made their own ministers cry and leave. This is how intense these people are. Not only that, but Burroughs, the second of those two ministers, was subsequently arrested at the height of the witchcraft hysteria, and he was hanged as a witch. These people are fucking nuts. In this context, neighbors hating neighbors and internally being so worried about whether or not they were going to go to hell or not. Actually, one woman threw her baby daughter down the well and killed her because she said, at least now I'll know that I'm going to hell and I don't have to think about it anymore. I've killed my child. I'm definitely going to hell. Like, I've resolved it.
Oh my God.
So by the time that this witchcraft hysteria sort of peaked, right, the Massachusetts Bay Colony had been growing for 60 years. They came over in 1630. The witch trials started in 1692.
It's because they finally had some free time. Like, they had established everything, and they had a little bit of free time, and they're like, you know what's real? Witches. And you know what we should do? Burn them.
That is 100%, because I'm like, there are about 3 to 5 generations of Puritans living there, which means that most of the jobs, they would have had some backups. There would have been, like, the blacksmith's apprentice by that point, and, like, the barrel maker's apprentice. Like, it's okay. We have free time. Let's start fucking things up.
Ain't nothing more dangerous than a Puritan with a little bit of extra time on their hands.
Yes. The Salem Witch Trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts between February-ish of 1692 and May-ish of 1693. It was 15 months of craziness. This isn't the first time. It's not like this only happened in Salem for 15 months and hadn't happened before. Throughout the medieval era, mainstream Christian doctrine denied the existence of witches and witchcraft, condemning it as pagan superstition. But some people say that the work of the Dominican Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century helped shift Christian doctrine so that some Christian theologians began to accept the possibility of collaboration with the devil or with devils, which could give a person certain real supernatural powers. This led in 13th century France to a particularly gruesome branch of an already gruesome endeavor, the Inquisition, in which the Dominican order, the Dominicane, the Dogs of God, to hound mostly older, mostly women, torture them until they confess, and then kill them. Unlike heresy, which you could recant and be saved, the options when accused of witchcraft were acquittal or death. Prosecutions for the crime of witchcraft reached the high point in 1580 to 1630 during the Counter-Reformation, blordy-blordy-blorg. Something like 50,000 people were burned at the stake. 80% of them were women, and most of them were over 40. So that means you and I are in our prime witch-burning years, Claire.
Thank God. Finally there.
If they're coming, they are coming for us. Sarah Vowell also makes the point that the Puritans are essentially, they're our medieval people. They're closer in history to Chaucer than they are to The Wire, which is my favorite way of thinking about it. Placing people on a timeline between Chaucer and The Wire that's how we should put everything in history. We should always contextualize it with those two things. So if we're thinking about this as a phenomenon, we'll get farther if we remember that. These people have no idea what causes disease. A cold is a sign from God. It's just a completely different mindset. We don't have a lot in common with them, as we have been discovering as we talk about it. Here we are in the New England, about 60 years after the height of witch burning, which is also about 60 years after the colony was founded. In the Massachusetts Bay Colony, a group of girls ranging in age from 12 to 20 were the main accusers. And so your point about people finally having some free time, the teenage daughters of the land perhaps had the most free time. I'm sure they had household chores because women were very responsible for taking care of managing household and things like that, right? But if you're talking about idle hands, these hands were definitely idle. One of the girls, Elizabeth Hubbard, was 17 at the time and therefore legally allowed to testify at the trials. So she became a much bigger part of the situation than the other girls who made these accusations. She was an orphan who lived with her uncle, Dr. William Griggs, and was his maid. So there's a little Cinderella there, right? She's not being treated like his child, even though it was her uncle. I mean, they were very closely related. If I took my niece Madison in and treated her like this, my sister's ghost would come and strangle me in my sleep.
Right.
So that's weird. I think it also goes pretty far to explaining the power position of teenage girls in this society. I don't care if you're my niece. Wash my underwear in a 4-day laundry process, as we've talked about. So this group of teen girls included a bunch of them whose names I don't really think are that interesting, but 2 of them were the first 2, Abigail Williams and Betty Parris. They were first. Symptoms included throwing of objects, screaming, and contortion of the body. I, too, had fits, mostly when I was not allowed to sleep over with my friends. Basic teenage girl tantrum stuff. Dr. Griggs, who was Elizabeth Hubbard's uncle and the town physician, eventually concluded that the cause of the fits was supernatural, like you do when you don't have any other ideas.
Yeah.
And also when you're tormented by the idea of whether you're going to go to hell or not.
What's the deal with my niece? You know what? It's probably the devil.
We need to do an exorcism. No judgment. I do it too. I don't have an explanation for something. It must be fairies. Whatever. Okay. But this is a physician and a person of power in town, and he's saying that these teen girls are, in fact, subject to supernatural fits. So, okay, I'm going to tell you about a book. In 1668, a book called Against Modern Sadism. Full title, fucking brace yourself, Claire. Full title is A Blow at Modern Sadism in Some Philosophical Considerations About Witchcraft, to which is added the relation of the famed disturbance by the drummer in the house of Mrs. John Mompesson with some reflections on drollery and atheism.
This is so weird, but that was the title of my thesis. Bizarre.
And she calls them the Wordy Shipmates for a reason. I mean, this guy wasn't on the boat, but whew boy. The writer is somebody named Glanville, and in this treatise, it was possibly influenced by Thomas Aquinas. He claimed that people should believe in witches and apparitions. If they doubted the reality of spirits, they not only denied demons, but they denied God. He wanted to prove that the supernatural could not be denied. Those who did deny apparitions were considered heretics, for in denying them, they also disproved their own belief, their own stated belief in angels. On the one hand is utterly bonkers. I can't believe people are writing books about this. On the other hand, at least it's more internally consistent than a lot of modern Christians are. We believe in God, but we don't believe in fairies. Okay. That's another thing I really like about them, is that they are bonkers, but they're really trying hard. They're really trying hard, Claire. They're not lazy bonkers like maybe you and I are. They're really active participants in their own insanity.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth Hubbard had her first recorded fit on February 1st, 1692, right at the start of all of this. She would have definitely seen Abigail and Betty's fits when they came to her house to be checked out by her uncle, the doctor. Like I said, her age allowed her to testify, so she became a bigger part of this. And during one of the women's trials, Hubbard purported to be in a deep trance and unable to speak. Sullen teenage girl in the corner, not talking. As the trials progressed, she began instigating more and more accusations. I'm getting a lot of attention. This is working.
This is fun. Let's keep doing it.
She gave her last testimony on January 7th, 1693, so almost a full year later. Records show that she filed 40 legal complaints and testified 32 times. She wasn't the only one doing the accusing, though. And as you might expect, people got mad at their neighbors and accused them of witchcraft as a response to, like, fence line disputes and grazing rights. And that time, Goody Whymper painted her house a devilish shade of purple like the harlot she is. Just guessing. Women who didn't conform to the norms of Puritan society were more likely to be the target of an accusation, especially those who were unmarried or didn't have kids. This theocracy basically allowed the law and people's reptilian fear brains to, like, go into a dark corner and make out. And the results are bad, as we might expect.
I just also want to come back to that context that you first established, because we've made jokes about free time, and I'm sure there was some leisure time at that point once things were established, but it was a very hard life. So if the milk did spoil or if a crop did fail, that was devastating. And so you would be looking for someone to blame because that makes you feel better about a loss you suffer, right? Because these losses are huge for them at this time. So I just wanted to circle back to your context of like, this was a hard life.
The first 3 people accused and arrested for allegedly afflicting Betty, Abby, and 12-year-old Ann Putnam were Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba. Tituba was the first person accused. She was a servant in one of these girls' households, and she was a black enslaved person from the West Indies. And so, if we say, oh, she's accused first, what kind of guesses can we make? Like, we're looking to express power in a location where we're pretty sure it's not going to come back at us. We're pretty sure we're going to win, right? And that's what bullies do. Like, bullies punch down, and these young white teenage girls were punching down. So of the first 3 people accused, Sarah Good was poor, unmarried, and childless. She was accused of witchcraft because she was mean to neighbor kids. They described it in different terms, but what it boils down to is she was mean to neighbor kids. And you're like, you're a witch! Sarah Osborne rarely attended church meetings and was accused of witchcraft because Puritans believed that she had her own self-interests in mind following her remarriage to an indentured servant, i.e., seeing to your own needs means you're a witch.
Well, plus, as we discussed in the fashion episode, she was probably wearing a silk hood.
Yes, probably. Tituba was an enslaved woman from the West Indies. Like I said, she likely became a target because of her power position in the society. She was accused of attracting girls like Abigail Williams and Betty Parris with stories of enchantment and about sexual encounters with demons. Which, what? What? Each of these women was a kind of outcast and exhibited many of the character traits typical of, like, the usual suspects for witchcraft accusations. They were left to defend themselves. They were brought before local magistrates on the complaint of witchcraft. They were interrogated for several days and then sent to jail. At this point, it's as though everyone starts pointing fingers at everyone else. Some of them were trying to win battles they're having with their neighbors. Some are trying to resolve personal grudges of different kinds or to shame people they felt they'd been shamed by. It's almost as though, Claire, feelings don't go away, even in super repressive societies, and stuffing them down only makes them eventually explode. These are people who are trying to be good all the time, and they have no idea whether they're getting it right. The stress of that. Ooh.
Given that context, I'm not excusing it, but it's not surprising. I mean,
the accusations and trials lasted for about 18 months, and even though a few cooler heads kept saying, what are we actually doing here, you guys? What are we doing? One of the judges, who was a member of the army in some capacity, at the very start of it was like, you guys, what are you doing? And he was like, I'm not going to be a part of this. I'm not. You guys do whatever you got to do. I'm not going to be a part of it. And he's a man, and he had an important role in society, and so no one came after him and said he was a witch because he didn't want to be a part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a few of them were like, you guys were acting a little crazy. Some people fled to the wilderness to escape it, but the majority of people in Salem Village and Salem Town are in it. Let's go. This is what we're here for. So ultimately, more than 200 people were accused. 30 were found guilty. 19 were executed by hanging. That's 14 women and 5 men. And one other man, famously Giles Corey, was pressed to death for refusing to plead, and some people died in jail. In 15 months, 200 people... I don't have stats on how big the town was. 200 people seems like everyone would know everyone who was on trial. These are literally like people you're in school with, people whose family you're married into.
I want to jump back to Sarah Vowell. When you referenced her, she talked about this belief that we are all one body and that we should all support each other. So I'm wondering how you go from that fundamental belief to let's kill our neighbors. And I'm assuming the argument was something along the lines of, well, this is a cancer, right? The foot has died. We must cut it off. Or if we are one body, how do you justify doing that to your community?
So she actually has, of course, a great line about this. That idea that we are members of the same body is from a speech he delivers, or a sermon he delivers, called A Model of Christian Charity. And when he delivers it, he's either in England or he's out on the open sea. So he's the governor, but he's not actually governing yet. She says, "What's coming has yet to come, and here is what is coming. On June 14th, 1631, almost a year to the day after the Arbella arrives in Massachusetts, Governor Winthrop presides over the court in Boston. He records in his journal that a servant named Philip Ratcliffe, convicted of most foul, scandalous invectives against our churches and government, was censured to be whipped, lose his ears, and be banished the plantation, which was presently executed." She says, quote, "The Winthrop of Christian Charity, yearning that settlers should think of themselves as members of the same body, orders a man's ears to be cut off." And I think it is what you're talking about. If we are members of the same body, to protect ourselves, we must eliminate anything that is dangerous to our body. I mean, it's a recipe for like crazy xenophobia, right?
Yeah.
Puritans are fucking bonkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not an elegant conclusion, but I think it is the right one. This Salem Witch Trials are now over, and there's a huge legal and societal reckoning that happens, and it starts happening almost immediately after they're over. Something like 10 years after, the families are still like, "You gotta be kidding me, she wasn't a witch and you killed her. We need compensation for this, we need her record to be cleared, we need all of these things." And those arguments went on until I think they've all been exonerated now, officially legally exonerated now, but it took 200 years. So now I want to cut to this great article I found, and this source will be on our Patreon. The article is called "Most Witches Are Women Because Witch Hunts Are All About Persecuting the Powerless." Bridget Marshall, who's an associate professor of English at the University of Massachusetts in Lowell, she says that Puritans thought women should have babies, raise children, manage households, and model Christian subservience to their husbands. They also believed that women were more likely to be tempted by the devil because at one point one of us wanted to try an apple. That's still haunting us. When women stepped out of their prescribed roles, they became targets. Too much wealth might reflect sinful gains. Too little money demonstrated bad character. Too many children could indicate a deal with the devil. Having too few children was suspicious too.
Just can't fucking win.
So if a woman didn't smile enough or smiled too much, had too many children or too few, was too rich or too poor, was too grateful or not grateful enough, and who decides whether she hits that imperceptible sweet spot of good womanhood? Men. It wasn't the first time a society decided to purge itself of members of a gender that they thought maybe weren't worth a lot. I mean, older women, right? Past childbearing age. What's the point of you? If I have someone else to clean my house, what's the point of you? Seems to be the attitude, right? And so that was happening on the continent. But here, the very framework that they are working within, the thing they're there to do, they are there in that colony to be a Christian city and to convert others to Christianity to save them. That is their purpose there. This is mission-driven life. And it's mission-driven life with the pressure of not knowing whether or not your work is ever going to be enough to get you into heaven. And when a society goes crazy in that particular context, it goes crazy by punching down and by choosing easy targets and taking out its rage on them, maybe. So, I mean, that's the Salem Witch Trials, man. We're glad we're not Puritans.
Puritans be crazy.
I cannot recommend Sarah Vowell's book, The Wordy Shipmates, enough. We've said it a lot of times, and that's because it's super, super good. And I hope this Halloween, if we're thinking about how the veil is thinning between the realms of the living and the dead, if we're trying to engage with that in some sort of way, we are actually being closer to Puritans who believed that devils walked the earth than we are to modern Christians who say that that's nonsense, pagan nonsense. So if one of your modern Christian neighbors tells you that you are a pagan for dressing up and going out trick-or-treating, you can always tell them that you're simply being a Puritan this year. I am trying to inhabit John Winthrop.
I, too, am wordy.
Well, thanks for listening, Claire. That was super fun to tell you, even though, I mean, it's horrifying and terrible, but fun to talk about.
You know what? Seasonally appropriate and creepy as fuck. That's what it is.
Yes.
Again, you can check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/itchoosesyou, if you'd like to get any sources for this episode. We will see you all next time. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Testing? Great. Thank you for listening to It Chooses You. Your hosts are Teresa Sparks and Claire Patton. Our theme song is by Bobby Dart. If you'd like to get in touch with us, drop us an email at itchoosesyoupodcast@gmail.com.